Hey Brazil, it's Paul Pope, and I'm just here to say hi and to announce that we're going to be releasing Heavy Liquid in Brazil, Mino, Editorial, and myself. And I just wanted to say a couple things about it. Well, we released Escapo 2 years ago, and it did really well. It was a beautiful edition, hardcover. I was real happy I came down to Sao Paulo and we promoted the book. And, despite this crazy year with COVID, I'm really happy to say that Mino's moving forward with their plans. And Heavy Liquid will be coming out soon in a new edition, a little bit oversized format from American Comics with some added material using the design that I did for the American edition that came out last year. And I think the really special thing about comics that makes it different from literature, different from painting, different from film, is the way that the artist can break down time and the reader can choose the amount of time they want to spend on each drawing or each panel, each sequence. Unlike with film or with like stage plays or things like that where we don't control the rate of action. And I also like that, like in my case, I studied anatomy, art history, studio arts, paintings, screen printing, things like that for years when I was in college. And so I learned how to draw dynamic action. And, in comics, a lot of times we have that, like whether it's superheroes fighting or war comics or romance comics, it's always human action or characters acting. And that's one thing that really attracts me to comics, is that you can really flesh out an entire world with all sorts of characters. You don't have to worry about a budget or casting, lighting a big crew like you would in a movie. The cartoonist is the director, the cinematographer, the editor, and the actor, all these different things that go into it make it a really special medium. And also, I really love making books. I think it's really fun. And, Mino does some really beautiful books, so I'm looking forward to coming back to Brazil to promote Heavy Liquid, once we can travel again with everything. So I just want to say thank you, and I hope you take a look at Heavy Liquid when it comes out in Brazil. And Heavy Liquid has an interesting history. I first wrote the story, came up with the title and the characters when I was working for Kodansha in Japan in the 90s. And I wanted to do something that was a barrage of science fiction and noir and comic books and extraterrestrial things and car chases. This is basically all the stuff that I thought was cool. And then I actually wound up repackaging it and finally publishing it in America with Vertigo, DC Comics Vertigo. And at the time I had just moved to New York, so I was really just in love with the Lower East Side and all of the texture and the old buildings and the noise and chaos of Manhattan. So I wanted to do a book that was sort of cyberpunk, also sort of rock and roll, like if you know Nick Roeg's film Performance with Mick Jagger and Jamie Foxx. Not the Jamie Foxx we know. That was an influence. The French Connection was an influence. Femme Nikita. And then the other early Luc Besson films. I like Subway, that's a good film. So a lot of these film influences were going into what I was imagining for Heavy Liquid. I just wanted something that was really cool, kind of rock and roll. At the time there wasn't anything quite like that, especially at Vertigo. They were doing a lot of horror stories and gang stories, and so I wanted to do something that was a little bit different from that. Heavy Liquid has an unusual look. I persuaded Vertigo to let me art direct the book, and I wanted to do something that was in limited colors rather than what we normally think of with a full palette, yellows, greens, purples, all these colors. I wanted something more acidic. and kind of artsy, I guess you'd say. And so I was looking at old manga, and they would oftentimes publish in just 2 colors or 3 colors. And I settled on a palette I liked a lot that was very strong red and a very strong blue. And when you printed those in tints, you got all kinds of really nice, very subtle light blues, pinks, magentas. And when you printed over top of each other, you got sort of a purplish brown color. And I liked that because it had artistic limitations which appealed to me. And also the subject of the story, it has to do with, you know, like metaphors for addiction, obsession, cyberpunk surveillance, all these kinds of things. I wanted something that felt very acidic and sick, almost like sick colors. And I thought that palette was perfect for the book, so we went with that. And here's one for all the art school kids and cartoonists and art lovers out there. Mino asked me to say a word or two about the tools I use, and believe it or not, I pretty much use the same tools I use now that I did when I was making heavy liquid. Because of my time in Japan, I oftentimes prefer Japanese art materials, Japanese inks. So I draw almost exclusively with sumi ink, which is a type of ink, black ink, purple, or different colors, orange. But in my case, I use the black sumi, which is a calligraphy ink. It has a really nice consistency. It's very thick. It dries fairly slowly, which is nice because it has kind of a heavier consistency than a lot of the other inks that cartoonists usually use. I've always liked analog tools. I'm not really that crazy about digital tools. I use them, of course, everyone does. Photoshop for layout, for coloring. But because of my time in Japan, I tend to gravitate toward very traditional tools, you know, like brushes, whether it's natural hair fibers or synthetic, pencils, on paper. So in that sense, it's a very traditional approach to making comics, very classic. And that's always been appealing because I like the craft element, you know, the hands-on element. There's something really fun about that.